Okay, so this is a video to talk about how to use the NiFi Registry event scripted hook so that any flow that you are versioning in the NiFi Registry will be automatically synced into the DataFlow Catalog. So right now, the expectation for users is to design their flows in an existing NiFi environment, such as NiFi in DataHub on CDP public cloud or NiFi on-prem, and then export this flow definition and import it into the DataFlow catalog, which is a requirement for then deploying this flow on NiFi on Kubernetes in the DataFlow service. So this export import process can be manual. It can also be automated using the APIs. But in this video, I want to talk about another option to make all of this fully automated so that anything you are registering in the NiFi registry is automatically synced into the DataFlow catalog. So that's really the blue line that we are seeing here. So the first thing is to configure the NiFi registry for using the scripted hook. So the first step is to go into your NiFi cluster where you have NiFi registry, go into the Cloudera Manager UI here. Let me move this around. Okay, so here you can go in Cloudera Manager UI, you can go into your NiFi registry service configuration, and then you will need to use a safety valve. So if you search for safety, you will see here a safety valve for the providers.xml configuration file. And you need to enable the hook provider, set it to true so that it's enabled. Then you specify which one you want to use. In our case, we want to use the script event hook provider. Then you give it the path to the script that is going to be executed each time there is something happening in the NiFi registry. And then the working directory, and I just set it to the directory where the script is located. So that's the first step. Every time there is going to be something happening in the NiFi registry, this script is going to be executed and provided with arguments that you can look for and decide whether or not there should be some actions. Before diving into the script itself, there are two things that are required for the script to be working. The first thing is to have the NiFi CLI installed and configured on the host so that the script is going to interact with the NiFi registry APIs out of the box without any configuration. And then the other requirement is to have the CDP CLI available, installed on the node and configured to interact with the DataFlow Catalog APIs out of the box. So the NiFi CLI is already available on your node out of the box. You don't need to do anything here, but you need to install the CDP CLI. And for interacting with the DataFlow service, you need to install the beta version of the CDP CLI because this is still part of the beta version as of today. For interacting with the CDP CLI, you will need to specify a user that will be used to interact with the DataFlow catalog. So another thing you need to do is to go into CDP public cloud, go into the user management and create a machine user. In that case here, I created this user, NiFi DataFlow Catalog Sync, and that's the user I'm going to use. You need to generate an access key for that user, which is going to give you an access key ID and a private key that will be required to configure the CDP CLI. And in terms of roles, you need to give it DataFlow Catalog admin and DataFlow Catalog viewer to have both read and write permissions to the DataFlow Catalog. Okay, so let me clear this a bit. So if I SSH to the node, the management node on my DataHub cluster where my NiFi registry service is installed, I go into that directory. That's a working directory for the NiFi registry, where you already see a few things available. I created this script directory, as I was saying before, and that's where I created my file, my script here. And this file is a file managed by my script. I will give some explanation about this in a minute. So that's really what I have. And as you can see here, I installed the CDP client. So that's where I installed it. Just follow the Cloudera documentation on how to install it. Things that are important is to configure both the CLI, NiFi CLI, and the CDP CLI with the right, let's say, configuration files, so that it's using the proper configuration out of the box. All of these files are based on the user that is going to be used to execute those scripts. And this is going to be the NiFi registry user. And the home directory of the NiFi registry user is var lib NiFi registry. So that's where we need to configure a few things. The first one is to configure the CDP directory, and in particular this credentials file, where you will provide your access key and private key. So that's when the NiFi registry user is going to use the CDP CLI, it will be using those credentials out of the box. So that's something you need to configure by yourself. That's the first thing. And then in this location, parcels, CFM toolkits bin CLI.sh. That's the NiFi CLI that is available out of the box on all of the nodes of your Data Hub cluster. But you need to configure a couple of files for this to be working out of the box in terms of HTTPS configuration, mutual TLS authentication, and so on. So same story here. This is going to be used by the NiFi registry user. So two files are expected in the home directory of the NiFi registry user, which is valid NiFi registry. The first one is just this file here, nifi-cli.config, which is just a reference to another file. So we need this line here that is referencing the other file here, which contains the information to interact with the NiFi registry CLI. If you want to, if you want, or if you need to also interact with the NiFi APIs, you can also specify a second file here that will contain similar information, but for interacting with NiFi and not the NiFi registry. That's why you have two files here, depending on how you want to use the CLI. In this case, I just want to use the CLI to interact with the NiFi registry API, so I just need the first one. That's why I have only that file. And if I show you what is inside that file, you can see we have a few lines. The first one is the base URL to interact with the NiFi registry, key store path, key store type, key store password, key password, trust store path, trust store type, etc., etc. Just something that I did here, which is wrong. Here, I'm giving a path to the key store that is depending on a configuration directory. That's not something you should use. Instead, you can use the key store in the working directory. So here, as you can see here, the file is available. So instead of using that path here, you could use instead that path here. That's just a small mistake I did on my side. You can change it easily. And that's it. Once you have all of this, you can interact with the NiFi registry using the CLI very easily. Yeah, so that's very easy. Let's go into the script now. So as I said, the script is assuming that the CDP CLI is installed and you have the NiFi CLI available, giving the path to both of these CLIs. And I'm also expecting a mapping file that I will describing in a minute. Okay, so first step is to only do something when we are receiving a specific event. The NiFi registry is going to execute that script for many events. We don't want to do something for every event. So the first step is to only do something when we have this event, create flow version. When we have this event, which is always the first argument, we know that we have a few arguments available. We have the bucket ID from the NiFi registry where the flow has been versioned, the flow ID, and the flow version. The first step we are going to do is export this flow version as a JSON file into a temporary file. So that's what we are doing here. We are using the NiFi CLI to export the flow version with the flow identifier and the flow version into a JSON file. From this file, we are going to extract the flow name. We are also going to extract the comments associated to this specific version. And to extract the flow description, we need to do something a bit different. We need to list the flows for within the bucket identifier, and then get the description for this specific flow. This is to extract the flow description. It's not really important, but just to be complete, this is something I'm doing. The next step is to look into my mapping file to check whether or not this flow has been synced into the DataFlow catalog already or not in the past. So that's where I'm checking if my mapping file is containing the flow ID. If it does, we are executing this piece. If it does not, we are executing this piece. Let's look into this part first, because since the flow ID is not in our mapping file, it means that this is the first time we are syncing this flow into the DataFlow catalog. So we are using the CDP CLI and the import flow definition command to import the flow JSON file with the name, the description, and the comments. And we get the output of the command execution to extract the CRN and add this into my mapping file. So we have the flow ID, which is the identifier of the flow in the NiFi registry, and we have the CRN, which is the flow identifier in the DataFlow catalog, and we add this into my mapping file. Great, and if we already did it, then we extract the CRN from my mapping file, and then we use another CLI command, which is import flow definition version. We give it the CRN, the JSON file, and the comments of this specific version. And that's it. This is all we need to configure so that everything is synced out of the box between the NiFi registry and the DataFlow catalog. So let's do a short demo. NiFi registry is empty, NiFi flow is empty. So let's drag and drop a process group. This is my flow and to sync in the F. Okay, so this is a process group. That's great. I can right click on it, start version control, select my bucket. I'll only have one. Give a flow name here. This is my flow to sync in DF catalog. This is the name of the flow I want. This is my flow description here. Let's see how it goes. And first version, save. So it takes a few, so it's synced into the NiFi registry, but it may take a few seconds here to show the green mark to say, well, this is perfectly versioned in NiFi registry. So okay, we have it here. If we refresh in the NiFi registry UI, we can see that flow is available here. So we have my flow here. This is my flow description, blah, 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 first version here. And this one is an old one that we can ignore. And if we go into the DataFlow catalog here, and if I search for sync, we have here my flow that has been added a minute ago. And this is my flow. If we open it, we see here, this is my flow description here. Let's see how it goes. First version, and this is my version. And I could deploy it on NiFi on Kubernetes if I wanted to. Now, let's say that I have, I don't know, generate flow file, processor, update attribute here, and I just want to connect the two here, auto terminate this, and that's it. Technically speaking, we have a flow that we could start and deploy. So, okay, we could say right click here. So let's right click here, version commit local changes. This is my second version of my flow. We can deploy it and save. And that's it. This is saved. We can see it here. If I go back at the root level here, we can see that this is version 2. And if I go in the NiFi registry and refresh here, we should see here version 2 versions for my flow. So we have the 2 versions here. This is my second version of my flow. We can deploy it. And if I go in the DataFlow catalog, and if I refresh here, I have another version now available here, and we can see here that this is my second version. Something to keep in mind that is important, it's that everything, all of the interactions with the DataFlow catalog are done using my machine user. It's not done using my own identity, because as of today, there is no way to proxy requests made against the DataFlow APIs as another user. So right now, this is the user I configured that is used to push the flows into the DataFlow catalog. So yeah, maybe something that will change in the future, but right now you need to do this. And that's it. Something that you could imagine is to go one step further and use this concept of scripted hooks, so that based on the comments here, if you are using specific keywords, you could even go one step further and not just version the flow into the DataFlow catalog, but also trigger a deployment of the flow. That would be something you can script as well very easily. So you could say, if my comment contains the keyword production ready, then deploy the flow on NiFi on Kubernetes. That's something that you could do easily using this approach. That's it. That's all I wanted to talk about. I will share the scripts in a gist on GitHub so that you can reuse it easily if you want. And yeah, hopefully this will be useful for you.